So, you might be sat there looking at that title thinking, if your official job title isn't marketeer, well, why are we talking about empowering my inner marketeer, Sharon, when I'm not really a marketeer? You know, some of you actually employ a marketeer. Some of you have got support team members that are helping you with your marketing. So why are we talking about inner marketeer? Well, why do you think we're going to talk about empowering your inner marketeer? Who wants to have a stab at it?
We're all going to create our own plan.
You are going to, but I certainly hope so, Steve. I'm praying, yes. You're going to create your own plan. And, you know, one of the things that we've talked about is doing things that other people aren't willing to do. Yeah? But at the same time, as you're implementing this plan, you've also got all the other things that you're going to do. And so there may well be times when little phrases creep in like, I haven't got time today. I know we talked about consistency back at that nice hotel where there was lots of sweets and chocolates and cakes. Yeah? But I need to do my next Boolean search or review my ad. Yeah? So I need to kind of work on my job. So some of that cold campaign stuff that we talked about, maybe that gets a little bit slipped. So that when you are back out, you know, doing what you're doing, working in and on your businesses, so that you are able to keep on track with that plan, to take the actions that you are committing to today, that you know you've got down in your notes, that you talked about on the flip chart this morning. I want to give you that opportunity to really be aware when that little chatter in your head might kind of like get a little bit loud. Okay, so I want to start though this session by talking about three women. So apologies guys, this wasn't a case of I'm only going to talk about women. This was just kind of like very recent, okay, that we came across, well, we're aware of this particular lady in the swimsuit. Has anybody heard of a lady called Diana Nayad? No? She's an American lady, and you know, she was, even from being like a little kid, she was massively into swimming. Her dad was from Cuba, and they were living in the States. And you know, she swam competitively through school and kids and everything, and then as a young adult got into open water swimming, a lot of it in the sea, and did kind of like, you know, various challenges, and you know, got quite a bit of accolade really, and then had this kind of like goal. And it was kind of like a goal that got triggered by a dad who died when she was quite young. And he talked about this swim from Cuba to Key West. And it's 103 miles, and Mike's nodding, I thought Mike might have heard this. It's 103 miles as the pigeon flies, but of course there's currents that can make it a little bit longer at times as well. And she decided that this was kind of like her big challenge and her big goal. So she was 28 and she set out on this swim, and the goal was to do it without being surrounded by like a shark cage. Because, you know, when you're doing that kind of swim, you're out in certain oceans and there are sharks and there's box jellyfish, and it's quite dangerous, really. But think about this, right? Open water swimming in the ocean, so that's probably the most challenging open water swimming you could do, 103 miles. Now, I didn't even ask the question, and the lovely Rachel was shaking her head here. Is the body capable of that kind of feat. You know, it's kind of, some would say yes, and some may say, and there were a lot of people at the time that said no, it's just not possible. Anyway, she did it at 28. She attempted it at 28, and she only got so far. And it's just like utterly exhausted, and had to get out of the water. You know, I guess she's also dealing with the temperature of the water, how she eats food to keep fueled and everything. It was just a massive, massive challenge that she was taking on. Anyway, she didn't accomplish it. So fast track, 32 years later, and she turned 60. And, you know, she was talking to a friend one day, and she was lamenting the fact that why is it when you turn 60 as, you know, as a woman, and I'm sure for guys this kind of like comes up as well, it's like suddenly, you know, society's kind of like got a very different view of you. The dials turn from 6, from 5, and suddenly it's like, you know, different things kind of like seem shut off. And she said, you know, I feel I'm just in the prime of my life, and I've got so much that I want to do. Anyway, I'm going to cut a long story short because it's a long story. But the reality was, she woke up one day and said to her best friend, I'm going to do Cuba to Key West. And I've worked out what went wrong. So she remortgaged a house, and over the course of 4 years had 4 attempts to do this swim. Okay, and it was accompanied by a boat, and there was a team, including a medic and different people. Now, the vision that she had was she wanted to do this without any shark kind of like cage. So it was completely open water. And she eventually did it on the 4th attempt. Okay, she was 64 years old. She had to swim 110 miles because of the currents. She was hallucinating at one point. And she was just utterly determined not to get out of that water and get onto that kind of like boat that was accompanying her. And she did it. She could, when she got to Key West, she had to kind of like meet some rules of open water challenges. She had to walk out of the water unaided, so that her 2 bare feet were on the sand. There had to be no water around her feet. Okay, and if she did that, then that, in theory, qualified as, you know, she'd kind of like accomplished it. How she managed to walk those final couple of paces, I mean, the woman just looked like she was about to collapse into the water. You can see a video on YouTube of it, and there's a movie out about it. But it's absolutely amazing what she did. So, and she was 64, and she was a woman. Okay? Now, let's kind of like go to, you know, a younger woman earlier in their life. And I don't know if anybody recently saw the Soldier series on TV, and where there were 49 like trainees off to Catterick for their infantry training. Okay, 45 guys, 4 women. I think it was 20 or just under 20 stayed the course of the 6 months. 2 made the course, and they were young women. But there was a difference in those 2 women. One was not quite my height, probably like sort of 5'2", so a little bit shorter than me, and incredibly slight, less than, she was about 45 kilograms in weight. She was really slight, okay? The other one, and you can see her on your left here, she was probably my height and probably very similar build, okay? And one of the challenges that they have to do to pass their like probationary 6-month training is the infantry. If you take the infantry regiment, they carry the heaviest packs of any regiment in the army. And it ranges from 15 to 25 kilograms. And one of the tests is they have a 25 kilogram pack, and they have to do, they have to cover 8 miles. Some of it, the majority of it, the first kind of like 6.5 miles, is walking, but kind of like, you know, at a pace. And they have 2 stops. And then the third little section is 1.5 miles, and they have to run it in 13 minutes. And if they get 13 minutes 1 second, they fail it. They get one more attempt to do that, and if they fail it a second time, it doesn't matter how they've performed in all the other activities that they've had over the course of 6 months, they fail the 6 months. So this is absolutely key. And it's key for them because they are out there on the front line defending all of us in this room. And, you know, if one of their team gets injured, they've got to be able to pick that person up and carry them, either as a team on a stretcher or get them over their shoulder and firemen lift them to some kind of like safe space, yeah? So they've got to have the endurance and the ability to do this. So these 2 young women set off, you know, they do the walking thing, they're pretty shattered, and it gets to the 13-minute 1.5 mile run. Okay, now the really petite one, when she put this 25 kilogram pack on, this is no joke, right? If you go and watch the program, she literally is like this, leaning over with the weight of this pack because she's so slight. But she starts running, and she's off there. And the other one, the slightly taller one, she's kind of like lagging behind a little bit. And it's looking pretty hard work. And she's got this kind of like sergeant at the side of her running with her. And he's kind of like just encouraging her, you know, come on, you can do it, you can do it. And she's saying, I can't breathe. I can't do this. I'm going to have to stop. And she made it eventually in something like 13 minutes, 15 seconds. Okay, and she was gutted. She collapsed to the floor, fell onto this pack, bless her. So she had one more try. But the slight one, who was half bent over, she did it. Okay. Now, the other one, she had one more try. There were a couple of guys that didn't make it. Okay, it wasn't just her. There were a couple of guys that didn't make it. So about 4 of them altogether. So they set off the second time, and this young woman, her dad had been in the infantry, and she was absolutely determined that she was going to get through this 6-month training. She dreamed of this. And so she sets off, does the first 6.5 miles again, gets to the 1.5 miles in 13 minutes. And she sets off. And honestly, if you go and watch it, she doesn't look like she's running any faster than she did the first time. But this time, she was quiet. There was nothing coming out of her mouth. Her head was down. She got the sergeant at the side of her. He wasn't saying much to her this time, but she just kept her head down. She kept putting one foot in front of the other, and she did it. Not only did she do it, she knocked 45 seconds off her first attempt and did it in 12 minutes, 30 seconds. Yeah? Now, Diana Nyad said to her friend that day, I know what's the difference, and I know why I'm going to succeed this time. Even though it took her 4 attempts, they were all to do with the physical elements. What do you think the difference was for Diana the young woman that did the 13 minutes first time round and the young woman that did it the second time round, what do you think the difference was? Because both are incredibly physically demanding challenges, and many would say that women might not do because we don't have the same physique and strength as guys do. What do you think the difference was? Mindset. Yeah. Physically, the sergeant was shouting to the girl, it's not your body. Your body can do this. All the other things that you've been doing in the last 6 months, your body can do this. It's your head you need to get sorted. Yeah. And so, you know, it was just timely stories, really, when I was thinking about this session, that, you know, you all are very experienced, whether you're a marketeer, whether you are a recruitment owner, whether you are a recruitment consultant team member. You know, we've all got amazing talents and strengths. You've all got the ability to do everything that we talk about here. Get on video, put together email campaigns, cold campaigns, follow them up. You've all got that capability. But the thing is, when we're kind of out of this room and you're back in the business, working in it and on it, that chatter in your head is going to come up at times. Yeah? So you know yourselves. What kind of things come up for you? Because one of the things that I hear a lot is, I don't have time. And that halts people. Yeah? Who is willing to admit that, you know, you recognise that you hear yourself say that at times? I'm good. Yeah. Thank you, James. Yeah. I don't have time.
I've invested in the initial time and setting it all up to then make it easy for myself. I think that's what I'm realising.
Yes. Yeah. What else? What else comes up? Oh, bright light. Fear. And what do you say to yourself about that, Steve? What's that conversation you have in your head that comes up?
It's the unknown, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, but it's that battle, it's that mental battle. You know that you've got to do it.
Yeah.
You're not doing it.
Yeah.
If you carry on doing what you're doing, you're always going to be what you are.
Yes.
So you've got to do it.
Yeah.
And then it's that monkey on the shoulder in your ear.
Yeah.
It's easier to do that.
It's easy to do that. Yeah. Whatever your X is, it's easier to do. It's easier to do that thing that's most comfortable, isn't it? Natalie, you popped your...
I don't want it enough.
Ah, nice one. Yeah.
I think you know, as recruiters, we've got a very short-term lens as well. We're looking at the sort of the now and the quick.
I want it now.
Yeah, it's the play. You know, you're looking at revenue, you know, every month. You're looking at sort of, what am I going to do in December?
I think I don't want to get it wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
There's many ways that can manifest itself. I don't want to sound like that person that just landed in my inbox yesterday with the same bland marketing kind of outreach message. I want to be perceived in that way and have a conversation that the client might think, oh, that wasn't quite, well, it wasn't quite right.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I agree, Paul. Yeah. I don't have the capability to understand it. I can't understand. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to, yeah.
I think it's having compelling messaging. I think that's what holds me back. Just whether it's
It's not compelling. Is it compelling enough?
Yeah, is it compelling enough?
Yeah.
There's always-
Or it isn't
Like,
compelling
in my
enough.
inbox, would I buy it?
Now, just out of interest, if you just take that one, how will you know, based on fact, not gut feeling in this instance, how will you know if that message is or isn't compelling enough?
Trying it.
Yeah. Let's give it a go. Yeah, it's the only way we're going to get any data to say, is that message getting a response? Are people opening it? And when they are opening it, am I getting a response back? Because if they're not opening in the first place, then we need to kind of like go back and look at the title. You know, have we got the title compelling enough to get them to click and open? If they're reading it, but maybe they're not acting, they're not responding, if you've got a link in there, they're not clicking the link, well then, well, right, okay, well they're opening it, so the title's a bit hooky, but then the messaging, maybe the messaging's not quite right. So, you know, we can kind of like, but we're not going to be able to do any of that unless we press send and go on that campaign, yeah? But it's interesting, isn't it? Because so often we don't press send because we're having that conversation with ourselves. And the other one that I often hear is sometimes it's a question that we pose ourselves, and that is, will it work?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It's a question rather than a thought.
yeah, biggie for me is I can get them in, but where do I go from there? Once I've got the conversations, how do I close it? How do I get it finished?
Yeah. Where do I go next? Yeah. Where do I go next? Yeah.
And then I go, what do I do with this?
So I think we all have different ways of talking about it, don't we? Because, you know, Steve, you mentioned that you're having the chimp on our little shoulder that's kind of like, you know, having that chit-chatter conversation with us. And the reality is that we all have our own version of that, yeah? And it doesn't really matter whether we are setting ourselves some incredible physical challenge, like some people do. That could be anything from running your first 5K, by the way. It doesn't have to be 110 miles from Key West to Cuba or the other way around. You know, we all have challenges that we have our little chimp chatting on our shoulder, coming up with lots of reasons why. So the purpose of this session is, if we look at sort of like emotional intelligence, just to use that kind of like model for a second, there's 5 elements to emotional intelligence, and 2 of them for me are, I think, kind of like the biggest components of emotional intelligence, and that is having awareness in the first place that we've got that chimp on our shoulder, having a little chat to ourselves. Because I tell you, that little chimp can be very powerful sometimes and can hold us back. And then, when we're aware of it, that's fantastic, and it's half the battle. Because then what we need to do is we need to kind of like manage the conversation that little chimp is having. Okay, so we need to regulate those thoughts. Now, you remember this slide that I put up yesterday about what we can control and what we can't control. And we can control the words, the chatter. We can control the chatter that we have with ourselves, and we can control what comes out of here. And we can control our thoughts, what we do, how we chat to ourselves, etc. And of course, you know, there was all the things that, just to remind you again, the things that are outside our control. Now, I won't be offended by this, but I'm curious. Does anybody notice what is not on that slide today that was yesterday, that I said was outside of our control? And there's one thing. And it's fine if anybody doesn't spot it. No? That's fine. It was results. And I said that we can't control results yesterday.
I think we can.
I agree with you. I was intrigued that nobody kind of like questioned that yesterday, but it's fine because I knew what I wanted to talk about today. But I actually believe, and I agree with Jed, I think we can. Because we can control what goes on, we can control all those things. And, you know, if just kind of like using, you know, Diana and our lovely two sort of soldiers, it wasn't anything to do with their physical capability. It was all to do with the conversation that they had with themselves, what they said to themselves, and they can control that. You know, the young woman, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. But once she stopped that chatter and she focused herself and she told herself a different story, she smashed it. Absolutely smashed it. There wasn't one time, if you watch the movie about Diana Nyad, there are several times that they tried to get her out of the water when there were some jellyfish around. Box jellyfish are quite lethal. And it was only when she got stung and they had to administer you know, some quite serious medical attention to her. That was the only time she actually came out of the water, other than I think it was currents at one point, wasn't it? That basically she was just going so far off course, it was just ridiculous. But you know, she was absolutely determined to stay in that water, despite being very delirious at one point. So I'm with Jed. I think we can control our results. And I want to kind of like sort of share a few thoughts with you so that when you're not in this room, and you know, as a client of mine might say, Sharon, can you just come and sit on my shoulder all the time? Well, you know, I'd love to, but you can sit on your own shoulder when you've got that awareness of how to use some of these ideas. Now, what we do is when we're thinking about, you know, everyday life, we're quite dramatic. We talk about stories. We talk about what's going on for us, and you might say to somebody, you know, so how are things in your market? And you get this big whole story, okay? Now, some people will give you loads of detail. If it's like me, you're going to get a long version probably. Some people will give you not as much detail. They're going to give you the short version, right? But, you know, it's going to have, you know, for some people, a lot of drama in it, quite dramatic words. And other people, well, you know, it's not been an easy 6 months. And other people, it's like, oh my God, it's a nightmare. Yeah, I don't know where the next job's coming from. You know, and for some people, I realise that can be the case. But you know, but they build up this whole story around it. Now, think back to yesterday. I shared a story with you about 2 legal recruitment business owners. Okay, one, it was a very kind of like long story, very dramatic, you know, quite low mood-wise, and the other person, it was a completely different kettle of fish. Now, the key thing, when you find yourself in a bit of a flunk, right, and you're having that chit-chat about, oh, I'm not sure about whether I should do this, be aware that you are creating your own story, okay, about why you should or why you shouldn't. Okay, now the key thing to remember is whatever the situation is that you are considering, whether it's, putting out a video for the first time, doing video in BD outreach, whether it's kind of like that first cold email campaign, look at the facts of what is going on for your business. Because these two legal guys, if I think about the facts are they both worked in the legal market. The facts are they both shared with me the same verticals that were doing good and the same verticals that weren't doing good. They both shared with me the different marketing activities that they were doing. They both shared with me the volume and the frequency that they were doing those things at. What do you think the difference was between person one that wasn't having a great time and person two that was having a better time? Was that? Outlook.
They weren't doing the volume, were they? They were procrastinating.
Well, so their dialogue was very different. The dialogue was, it's an awful market. The mindset, Megan, yeah. The story they were telling themselves was, it's an awful market, it's tough, there's no jobs out there. But in the next breath, they're saying, well, yeah, when I said, well, I understand that, private family law is doing quite well. Well, yeah, but they were focusing on the negative. And when they focused on the negative, it influenced what they did. Whereas you've got the other person who was, much more upbeat, acknowledging that, well, okay, there's verticals that aren't doing so great. There's divisions in Castle that have had tough times, but there's other divisions that are doing okay. But it's not stopping the team getting on and doing stuff, is it? It's not, Tanya, no. So, we need to kind of think about what story we're telling ourselves and look at the facts, okay? So here's an idea then for you about, kind of like called it a thought loop. So the idea is that you, rather than looking at the story and getting caught up in the drama, that you look at the facts of the situation that's happening right now. So let's just carry on with these two legal recruiters for a second. Can you read that font? Is it big enough? So somebody's got the thought, this one individual had the thought, it's tough. I've not made a placement for the last 2 months. That was their thought that they were having, right? And that individual, he used that word to me, I'm worried. And I appreciate if you've not billed for 2 months, I appreciate you're going to be worried. Yeah? Now, when he was worried, that influenced what he did. So what he was doing was, and he told me this, he was talking to various other, let's say, marketing suppliers and business growth type people about how tough he was finding things and what should he do. So he was asking for some advice, but he was repeating his story over and over and over again. How many hours he must have spent on the phone to people like us, I don't know, but it was quite a chunk of time. And in terms of his activity that he was doing, I asked him, how many outreaches are you doing? And it was low, but he thought he was doing a lot. So he has this thought, it's tough in the market, I haven't made a placement for 2 months, he's worried naturally, but that's influencing what he was doing. He was repeating his story and over and over and over again, okay, which is just gonna reinforce how worried he is, which influences the fact that he's just repeating his story and he's not doing an awful lot in reality, okay? So what you've got then is you've got a thought. So think about a thought that you have when it comes to doing something you're uncomfortable doing. Video, cold outreach, picking up the phone, doing cold dialing, whatever it might be. You will have a thought about that. Is it going to work? Am I going to get rejected? Are they going to say no? Will they pick up the phone? Yeah? You have a thought, and that, just because of how our body is connected and how we're wired, that is going to generate a feeling, okay? And then you are going to act in some shape or form. You're going to do something. Now, think about it. If you're not feeling great, do you think you're going to go and do a lot of activity with passion, enthusiasm, commitment, determination to get the end result? Do you think you're going to do that in the same way if you are thinking, oh God, it's a tough place at the minute, and you're worried about where your next placement's coming from? You're not, are you? And if you kind of like act in a certain way, what drives the results that we get? Behaviour, absolutely, Katie. Behaviour, the things that we do, the things that physically we do, what we say to people, how we say it to them, the things that you and we can control. So, you know, going back to that thing, can we control our results? Jed, you said yes. And I'm absolutely with Jed. Because we can control our thoughts, our self-chatter, because we can control that, we absolutely can control our results. Because this individual here was in full control of their results. Because the other person that I spoke to, oh, that's not built how I want it to, but that's fine. Let's look at their thought. Well, the business is not coming to us like it did in 22. So we've got to go out and get it. That's a very different thought to, it's a tough market, I haven't made a placement for 2 months. It's a very different thought, isn't it? There's a different energy to that. And of course, what is that feeling that he's having? Well, he was so much more optimistic. He wasn't naive to think, you know, we're going to smash targets. They may well by the end of the year, but boy, they're going to have grafted for it. But he was optimistic. And because he was optimistic, and because for you and I, how we feel when we're doing something really influences what we do. And how we do it. And the degree, the level of activity that we do it. So if we're going to feel uncomfortable and say to ourselves, you know, this is going to be rubbish, this video. I don't know if I should post it. And you go into recording that video with that in mind, it's not going to be your best video, let's face it, is it? It's not going to be your kind of like your finest moment. But interestingly with this guy, what did he do? They increased their outbound activity, both cold. They implemented 2 BD sessions, which were an hour each, twice a day. So they upped it from 60 minutes to 60 minutes twice a day. They started cold emailing to bigger numbers across each of their legal verticals. And they really kind of had a focus. Their sales kind of like director had a real focus with the different sector kind of like heads on driving follow-up. Because in 2022, everything came to them and they weren't having to follow up in the same way. So they really kind of like got their teams organised. And, you know, it made a massive difference to their lead gen. So, you know, there's a lot more behind the scenes that's going on, and we've got so much control about this. So, what questions might you have? What does it make you think about you and your thoughts and the kind of thoughts that you have when you're really on fire and productive versus when maybe you're not sure?
I try and listen to that. They talk about your chakras, where you go, I want, I feel, I see, I am. And I try and build myself up from there. Okay, I want to close this call. I believe I can close this call. I feel I'm going to close this call. I am going to close this call.
Nice. Yeah. Now, yeah. And when you go into a call, you know, with that kind of like thought and mindset, what's your experience?
No, I'm yet to make the call.
You're right. Oh, okay, so you're getting yourself there.
Yeah,
So
I'm working myself up. I'm going to do it.
yeah.
I've got to go fetch the kids.
So what's the next step then?
Picking up the phone.
Yeah. The doing. Absolutely.
I think the problem is that when you're feeling all positive and optimistic, like so when you just made a placement and you're like, yeah, just do it, just go and call, just make more calls, and
Yeah.
this, and I'm up for it, and it's a challenge, and that's fine, and I know it's hard, but I'm excited by it. But once you're in the down bit, you look at it and you think, the only thing that I've really got as collateral is time, and all of these activities take up time.
Yes.
So it's like gambling, it's like backing a horse, and you're thinking, yeah, that horse looks good, yeah, it all makes sense, what Sharon said, I'm definitely doing this, and then you start doing it, and you think, oh, what if I'm in the wrong bit? What if I should have bit more on the other horse?
Yeah.
And it's that doubt that creeps in and kind of stops you and paralyses you a bit with not taking the action.
Yeah. And so what do you recognise here then? Just reflecting what you were saying, Jed, I'll come to you in a sec.
It's like both at the same time. So you know the business is not going to come to you and you need to do something.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
You're excited by the thought.
Yeah.
There, and it should come to it. But your other half of you
Yeah.
is saying, oh no, I'm worried and petrified. What if I've made the wrong decision? And
Yeah.
I'm going to waste too much time down this route when I should have taken another route.
Yeah. And that, who can relate to what Rachel's talking about? Absolutely. You know, so we set off with all the best of intentions, and then, and you know, that is kind of like this, you know, in a simplistic way, we've got two halves to our brain. That is the habit side of our brain that kicks in when we are outside our comfort zone. And that part of our brain, we'll call it the habit brain, it wants to keep us comfortable and safe. It wants us to do the easy stuff. So, you're aware of it, which is the first thing, yeah? The other part is regulating, let's call it managing it, so that you recognise. So what could you do, Rachel, do you think, when you recognise you've set up on a path and then that habit brain, that chatter is kicking in? What do you think you could do?
Just try and stop worrying. I think probably make a plan and ultimately stick to it.
Yeah.
Instead of a second kind of question in it.
Instead of listening to that. Absolutely. So recognise that you've got that chatter going on.
The thing is, when you're on the up, when you're having, you know, when you've just had some success, you don't question yourself.
No.
You're brilliant, and you go for it. But
Yeah.
you can have a couple of bad things happen, or the trouble is we all spend most time on LinkedIn, don't we? Because nature of it. You know, even if you think I'm only going to go and search, I end up reading 5 posts or something like that. And it's very negative.
Yes.
You know, people writing lots of negative things, or it's people boasting, but you know they're being a twat. So you kind of come off it and think, I must be a loser. You know, or things look really bad, and that then this kind of like doubt creeps in, and you think,
Yes.
am I using my time wisely? Am I doing the right thing? Do I know as much as everyone else?
Yeah.
And then that kind of it stops me, it kind of paralyses me a little bit.
Yes.
You know, and it doesn't take much to put me off doing stuff that I don't want to do, like videos, which I haven't done yet. But
Yeah.
it doesn't take a lot to stop me.
No.
I want to do it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. And I think, and you know, thank you for kind of like being so honest about it, because I know everybody in this room can relate to what you said there, right? Because when we're feeling uncomfortable, it is so easy to go and do something that distracts ourselves. And that might be checking out LinkedIn, checking out Facebook. And you end up consuming media. And some of that media isn't actually the most helpful and positive. And it's really interesting because when you're not necessarily in the most positive kind of like self-talk, what do you think you end up filtering for, information-wise?
Reinforce.
Absolutely. So let me go looking for stuff to kind of like reinforce how I'm thinking and how I'm feeling right now. And we are so wired, we're so wired as human beings for negativity. It's kind of like, and I'm so glad you've shared what you've shared, because we all every day, each of us every day, have a little battle with that talk inside our head. So we're all facing, at different times on different tasks and things that we want to do, different goals we want to achieve, we all face exactly what you've so eloquently described, Rachel, that we want to do it, we set off with gusto, and we kind of like, you know, but if we have a little bit of a dip, that self-doubt creeps in. And that's your thoughts, that's your self-talk. But you can control that. You can control the other media that you consume. So here's the thing, right? When you set off to record that video that you are going to record, because you were very determined last night when you were talking to me about doing that video, you're going to do that video and you're going to post it out there. And at some point during that, that little voice in your head, it is going to kick in at some point, yeah? So let's just acknowledge that and we'll be ready for it. So when it kicks in, you can then sort of say, well, this might all sound a little bit weird, but we do talk to ourselves, so we might as well do it constructively, yeah? You can say, I know what you're trying to do, and you're not going to knock me off track this time, because I'm going to take back control, because you can control it, which is why Jed said you can control your results. Because if we can control that chatter that we have, and we recognize it, and we don't listen to it, and think, I said, I committed to do that video, and I'm going to post it, and I'm going to do it. Whatever you're saying, I'm just going to put it to one side, and I'm just going to carry on. And that is why we talk about managing our minds, because it doesn't happen. We have to physically, consciously make those decisions and choices to manage that chatter in our head. Because boy, it can help us swim 103 miles or carry a 49-pound pack, or we can let it get the better of us and get out the water, or, you know, chuck the pack off our backs, or our version of that. Alex.
I just want to say, I think our mindset plays a lot on how we filter the media we see, in that if you're feeling shit and you see the tracks on LinkedIn, you'll look at them and go, oh, I'm useless, I'm not doing as well as they are. But if you're in a positive mindset, you'll look at it and go, shit, that's inspiring. I want to be there. And you can use that to fuel you more.
Okay. Jed.
Yeah, I think if you know, listening to both what Alex and Rachel have said, if you're on a positive and a high, that's great, and then you can go and do it. But I think you've then got to balance that. If you're worried and your confidence is low, you have a lack of confidence, and we seek other things that make us feel better, or whatever we do. If you then come down to, because ultimately it'll come down, for me, it comes down to fear of failure. So I have a real fear of failure. That's why I don't fail. So to overcome the fear of failure, I then kick in as I would do if I had the positive. So what you've got to get is between the highs and the lows, the positive and the lack of confidence is the balance. But I think Rachel said it, then you've got to prep it. Because it's great to do stuff when you're on, you know, I am, I feel, I will, and you know. I'll go and do that. But if you don't do it right, you could then slide towards the worry, the confidence, the low, nobody likes me, no one responds, don't know what I'm doing. Whether the positive or the confidence is low, you've just got to get the balance in the middle, and the key for me is the prep, because if you do the right prep, you'll probably get the right result.
So with your kind of like fear of failure, so I feel failure, let's say, would be a thought that you have, yeah? And I mean, is there a time that maybe, you know, let's say, I don't know, in the last 6 months, you're building a kind of like a big business. So has there been a time when you've had that thought thinking, oh my God, you know?
Lots of times.
Lots of times, yeah? Well, without sharing it, yeah, just think now of the most recent time when you've had that thought, okay? And how did it feel? Right in that moment when you found yourself thinking, oh my God, you know.
Low, worried for my future, other people's futures, the business's future.
Yeah.
You know, nobody likes us. Not that we necessarily care, but we do care because we care about us.
Yeah.
So what other people think of you and other people's opinions, yeah, they don't really bother me. The past you can learn from, but it's the future, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what you need to do. So the fear of failure kicks in to almost become the positive, because you have to make it happen.
Yeah. Right in that moment though, before let's say you kick into a different gear, so when you're feeling really worried, and you're feeling worried for yourself, for the team, because you're responsible, you know, for other people and their salaries and their mortgages and everything, what do you end up doing when you're feeling like that? Because when you're feeling like that, you haven't yet kicked into gear. So what do you do when you're right down in that pit?
I force myself to take some action and prepare that action and do it. And if it doesn't work, don't worry about it. Try and evaluate why it didn't work and do something else.
Right. Okay. So there's kind of like, and it's really interesting listening to what Jed's saying, because he's aware of that thought that he fears failure. And he's recognizing that it sends him into not a good place. He's worried, he's concerned not just for himself, but for his staff, yeah? He feels responsible. Now, some people would probably, you know, take themselves off, and, you know, some people would, you know, take themselves off, you know, to maybe go and have a walk and feel sorry for themselves. Yeah, some people might go to the pub and have a few whiskies and a few pints to drown their sorrows. Initially, yeah, before they're then able to say, hang on a minute here, you've got to do something about this, because this is not going to get me anywhere. Now, what Jed's version of the walk or the pints are, is to kind of like, before he does any action, he's pausing. So when he's worried, it's almost like a trigger for him to step back and think and plan. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that fair?
I mean, I might have done a walk and a few beers before that, but they don't work. But I've got to kick in at some point, because it's down to me, isn't it? So,
it is.
You know.
It is. But the interesting thing is, and I'm glad you shared that, because, you know, the reality is that when we're not feeling so clever, what we end up doing, we don't kick straight into that positive action planning gear. So you might, even if you did kind of like go and have a few beers and have a bit of a whinge and a moan to somebody and chew their ear off, whether it's a colleague or, you know, someone at home, you do that. That's what you do. And when you're doing that, you're not actually thinking positively at that point, because what you're doing at that point, likely, and think about your version of this, likely you're going over the story and you're winding yourself up. I was doing a great job of it in bed at 4 o'clock this morning. Yeah? An appointment got cancelled. And, you know, I've got full admiration and respect for the NHS, but, you know, it's not very often I go to the doctors. An appointment got cancelled on the back of another appointment that never got made, and I had to wait 14 weeks to find out it never got made, right? So I was a little bit chewed off, and I was having a good old rant with myself in bed last night. It was not helpful because the outcome was, the result was, I kept myself awake for far too long, yeah? But I sent myself right down a right little rabbit warren, yeah? And Rachel, I can see you nodding, and we do. Now, when I was, why I'm sharing it is because when I sent myself down that rabbit warren and I was getting myself really, really wound up about it, and I was quite annoyed, and I was creating a lovely script in my head of what I would email or say when I phoned the surgery, yeah? Word perfect, you know? That wasn't my most positive, constructive activity at 4 o'clock in the morning, yeah? I might have felt better for it, you know. But before I could get my head in a better place to get a little bit kip, ready for today, you know, I kind of like, I went through that negative spiral and I kept myself awake for too long, yeah? But I had to do that. I had to do those actions on the back of feeling angry and annoyed. I didn't automatically flick into that positive thought. That's the thing. So, you know, when you're feeling worried, you don't automatically flick into planning, review, and action. There is something that you do, whether it is a couple of beers or something, and we all have our version of that, by the way, because we can't automatically flit straight into something. There is that transition thing. I see Dawn and Natalie agreeing there. So, when you get yourself into action, yeah, what do you notice is the difference? Because if your thought is, I'm worried about failing, and you feel worried, what's different when you're taking all that positive action? What are you saying to yourself then?
When you feel good about doing something that you know that you've needed to do and you've completed the task, and then you say, well, if I've done my best with this and that doesn't work on that particular occasion, then
Yeah.
I'm going to try it again and I'm going to do more. So the balance, you know, you become more positive.
So, who noticed what the sentence was that Jed is using when he's feeling good? Who heard that? Because I realised you might not have heard everything at the back. So rather than feeling worried, which sends him off for a few beers and a chunter, let's say, he said, well, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about taking action. So he's moved into action, is feeling good. What was he saying to himself at that point?
More positive.
So he's more positive. It was like, so if I do X, can you remember what you said? Because that.
If I do the task that I know I need to do.
I do the task.
I'm
I
not
need.
necessarily that worried about the outcome because I feel more positive anyway.
Yeah. And basically what you said was, you know, if the first action doesn't work, then he'll just do it a different way. Yeah? So basically what he's saying is he moves into action. What's driving his action is feeling good. And he's feeling good because he's actually acting. So for Jed, getting into action with his plan, actually, he's able to do that because he's feeling better. And he's feeling better because what he's saying to himself, rather than, you know, I'm afraid of failing, is he's saying, look, I'm going to do this. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, I'll go and do something else. And that, having that thought rather than fearing failure, is creating a very different kind of like feeling for him. And because he's feeling different, he's cracking on and he's doing stuff. And that will create a different result. And generally, when you are in that frame of mind, let's say, do you get different results than when you're worried?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know this sounds really kind of like logical. Natalie, go for it.
And what I'm also hearing, one thing I live by is worry about what you can control, not what you can't.
Yeah.
And often when we're worried, it's because we're too focused on the outcomes.
Yeah.
You can't control, well, we discussed whether we can or can't control, but what you can definitely control is your action.
Yes.
So, and if you're not being proactive, by definition, you're being passive. And whenever you're passive, you're like being buffeted by the waves of the market.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
how you can end up in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what is really interesting, and that's I'm glad you kind of like brought that in actually, Natalie. What is really interesting is, so let's say what Jed has just said is that his results are better. Yeah. So let's kind of say his results are positive when he's implementing his plan. So he's acting on his plan, right? And he's taking all this really good action because he's in a good place and he's feeling good about himself rather than being worried, right? And he's feeling good because he's thinking, if I do X, and it doesn't work, I'll do Y. And then I'll do Z. And he'll keep going, right? Which that thought is different from I'm fearing failure here, right? Now, of course, that is all related to a particular situation, right? And that might be whatever that situation is. Now, what happens, coming back to your point, Natalie, is what happens is whatever the scenario is, and it could be something going wrong with a client. It could be, a candidate pulling out because they've been counter-offered. That's a particular scenario, yeah? Whatever the scenario is, okay, the danger that we fall into as human beings is that we tell ourselves these stories, okay, and what we do is we say, the market's not great. So we blame how we feel on the market. And we think that the market is responsible for us being worried or not feeling great or whatever our emotion is. Okay? Whereas the reality is, okay, that let's go back to our two, if you go back to our two legal guys, okay, they're in the same market. They operate in the same verticals. One was a small business, one was a bigger business. So one had more resources than the other, absolutely. But they both had access to the same verticals, the same kind of opportunities. They were both national. Okay? So the facts of their market dynamic, let's say, the facts were exactly the same. But the stories they were playing out was very different. Okay, so if you think about, they both worked in legal, they both worked, let's say, 8 verticals, they were both national, right? How come one person made that mean, I'm having a pretty awful time, and the other person makes it mean, well, it's not as great as last year, we're having to work harder and we're doing more, but it's okay. What's the difference? Same set of facts. Two different versions. Craig?
It's like a coping mechanism, isn't it? If I'm not blaming myself, not my fault. I'm not blaming something else. You can't pretend like you're making your own narrative to kind of cover up the facts, aren't you?
Fantastic. So that narrative is, so what happens is with the same set of facts, one person creates one version, their meaning of that set of facts, yeah? So and one meaning is, well, we'll blame the market.
It's facts and fiction, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, one person was blaming the market for how they were feeling, and the other person was taking responsibility. They made a different meaning. Who's been to the movies with a good friend or their other half? You've seen the same movie, you've both been excited to go and see that same movie, and you say, what did you think? Wasn't it great? It's like, where have you been the last 2 hours? Yeah, it was shocking. You've both sat through the same movie, you're both excited about seeing it, and one thinks fab, the other thinks not great, right? Same movie. Because what happens is, we experience that same movie, but we create a different meaning. So one has the thought, great, the other one, rubbish. Same set of facts. Yeah? So it's about being aware of the meaning that you are making of whatever is going on. Because you control that. Now, you can do what Craig said, and you can abdicate responsibility, and you can blame the situation. But if you do that, you're going to send yourself down an unhelpful rabbit warren. Craig?
So I was going to say as well, part of it is all around that self-motivation piece. If you think about it, it's going on a tangent here. I might come back to it in a bit.
That's all right.
Yeah, no. And I think the thing is, it's like, if you don't have, it's as much having a professional support network when you're feeling like that, it's all having a personal support network. I mean, we work fully at home now, and it's like
Yes.
you need a professional to know you're not looking for a colleague, but you can have those conversations, but also personal. And I'm a bit sadistic, so I'm at home, I'm having phone calls, my wife goes, "Oh, you quite cocky when you make your calls from your people." And I am, I'm really hyping myself up for everything I'm going into, and I'm going to be very sure. If you to do whatever you do to snap yourself out of that, I think it's very important that the people around you professionally and personally to be able to notice it and do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's important to get yourself into a right slump, and it just spirals out, and momentum builds momentum, right?
Well, it does, and it's kind of, it's having someone there to kind of like say, when we're stuck in our story and their woe stories, it's kind of like having somebody there to say, is that really true? Yeah? And how do you know that that is really true? Because half the time, if somebody says that to you, you think, no, I know, it's just, I'm making it all up, aren't I? Yeah, you are. Yeah, they don't really think that about me. And how do they know that they think that about? Well, I don't know. It's just that, it's that chatter that's making it up.
If I'm on a home, if my wife works at home at the same time, I say to her, if I make a call in an hour, pick me up on it and just say, gonna, do it today.
Yeah.
And it's just, and it's a little, I'm a bit weird like that, but if anything like that, and just telling yourself, having something there, if, like I said, when you work situation, I think it's just like being aware of it and doing, having that switch. And I think that's something everyone has a different ability to turn that switch on. Some people really struggle with that.
Well, and they do, and one of the reasons why they do, why do you think people struggle? Anybody? Why do you think people struggle to switch off that unhelpful dialogue? They look for that, and they don't have the awareness. So they don't have the awareness that that is unhelpful, and then they do what Dawn says, and they look for data to back up their point of view, and they will ask other people, and they want other people to agree with them, to validate that they are right, and that that means that they stay stuck, in that place. Okay. So, thinking then about how you're going to use this. how are you going to use this bit of insight? Because, you know, first of all, it's about being aware, and then it's about what do we do once we're aware. So you're out there recording some videos, your 6 or 7 emails and a couple of messages on LinkedIn and a couple of text messages into your call campaign. And, you know, you've had some engagement, but there's nothing quite as positive as you were hoping for just yet. And that chatter starts. What are you going to do? How could you use what I've just shared with you?
Adjust it or try another approach or add more people to your list.
Have a word with yourself.
Yeah.
Have a word with yourself first. Get that chatter going. Yeah, manage that negative stuff that's creeping in. Have a conversation with yourself. Check what you're saying to yourself, because that then will kick you into, you know, right, okay, as Jed said, well, if I do X and X doesn't work, then I do Y. And if Y doesn't work, I move on to Z, and I keep going.
I find it helps before you start actually define how you're going to measure success.
Yeah.
And if, particularly with something like that you're trying and you don't know whether it's going to work or not, then make the success as, you know, 10 actions. You know,
Yes.
calls,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And that is the success. Let go of the outcome.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
The success is you actually picking up the phone.
Doing the actions. Yeah.
It's trust in the process as well, isn't it? And we all get in a car now, plug a postcode in, sat nav, and trust sat nav is going to get us to where we want to go. And that's a bit like this whole marketing journey, isn't it? Trust
Yeah.
the process, it will get you to where you want to go.
Yeah.
You have to keep doing the action,
Yeah.
keep turning up,
Yeah.
Coming back to your
following the
why.
instructions. Yeah.
Yes.
Know your why.
Yes.
Even if you put it as a post-it note on your desk or whatever, just come back to your why and have that little, you know, if you've got the negative self-talk, go make a coffee, have a word with yourself, remember your why, go back to it, and then crack on.
Crack on.
Easier said than done, I know.
Yeah. But it's kind of like it's because you've not arrived at that just overnight. It's taken work for you to do that, hasn't it?
Yeah, like with Jed, he's his fear of failure, and I'm
Yeah.
very much the fear of failure.
Yeah.
So that will always be my why.
Yeah.
Fear of failure is my why.
Is your-
I want to provide for my family. I want to do this. I want to do that.
Yeah.
That's my why.
Yeah. Okay.
We
And
went
just
on we were on a recruitment masterclass with Greg Savage, and he was advice when you get stuck in this loop. And he said, obviously, if you've done your planning and you're all set, you're just stopping short. He said, take the thinking out of it. He said, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, JFDI, just effing do it. Just don't think about that.
Yeah.
Take the thinking. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? I'm just take the thinking out. Just don't think about it. You know.
Yep.
Take the if you're well, if I do this, it's going to go wrong. Just worry about it afterwards.
Which is Nicky Coffin's
Yeah,
mantra,
it is,
isn't it?
yeah.
JLDI.
Yeah.
Slow saying, paralysis by analysis, it all keeps you stuck.
Yeah.
Overthinking.
And the there is kind of like some science behind counting back 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It kind of like breaks the connection in the brain. So the loop that we're stuck in, it breaks that connection. And so if we break that connection and then we can like just do JFDI and get on with it, then that it's like an interruption to the self chatter as well. And just before as we close for lunch, just thinking about what Louise just shared with you there. You were saying, it's about trusting the process, yeah, and staying with it. Do you remember what you said to me about, she's going to cringe now, about 3 years ago? Louise came, asked to have a conversation. She'd worked with us a number of years before and went off and was doing things with the team, and things had kind of like had changed and everything. She came back and she said, I'm thinking I might need to do a bit of marketing again. Okay. What just came out of Louise's mouth did not come out of Louise's mouth. It was a bit of a different conversation, wasn't it? Yeah? Do you remember it?
Yeah, well, not quite, but
Yeah.
I remember it was, I couldn't visualise myself being where I am now.
No.
Then.
Yeah.
And
And
trusting the process.
it was trusting the process, and it was the same thing that Jed said. I'm just afraid that it's not going to work. Yeah,
But it does work.
it does work. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we all have fear of failure about a huge variety of different things, so we can all relate to that. But it's, the first step is about just kind of like noticing that conversation. And we can control it, and you can control your results. And it's not just about business, it's not just about getting your head in the right place to tap into your inner marketeer, which is where we started. You can use this in all different parts of your life to help you get the results that you want. When you want a particular result and it's not happening, just ask yourself, what's that little voice in my head saying to me? Become aware of it, and then you've got a choice. And just go back to that slide and think about all those different things that you can control. Okay?
I'm kind of thinking I need to allocate some windows in my diary as well, which are hard blocks, because it's easy to get busy resourcing and doing all the other bits, and then you just keep kicking it down the road.
You do. You do.
Some of these things are like heavy loaded at the front.
Yeah, yeah.
Once you put the work
Exactly,
in, you
yeah,
set them up,
yeah.
and they just run. They don't.
Yeah,
They
yeah, I
don't
think that's the thing, isn't it? It's getting a
No.
initial.
Yeah. And so this afternoon, what we're going to talk about then is we are going to talk about, I guess, sort of two very connected elements, and that is the planning piece, so that you can take the ideas that you've got, look at how you want to, build those into your plans. What's the plan going to look like for next year, sort of like, top line. And so we're going to do a workshop around that. And then we're also going to look at, when you are spinning those multiple plates, how can you ensure that you are as productive as you possibly can be? Because, that's kind of like an ongoing thing, as we're all juggling lots of different plates, and we want to make, the most of the time that we have got, because we've all got 24 hours in a day. Yeah, and it's how we use that personally, and we'll all do it differently. So we'll talk about that after lunch.